Given how wild and unpredictable the world can be, wouldn't life be so much easier if we could see into the future? Imagine being able to look ahead and know what good or bad thing is about to come around the corner. If times have been hard for you, knowing you've got something worth looking forward to might give you just enough willpower to keep going. Or if there's a storm on the horizon, then at least you would have enough time to prepare. Unfortunately, being able to glimpse at future events is a power that only a few, if any of us, are blessed with. Ask a cynic, and they might tell you that seeing the future is an ability reserved for scammers and con artists at fairgrounds, or selling out magic shows in Las Vegas. All people just trying to make a quick buck by telling their paying customers what they want to hear. You can't part the cloudy veil that hangs over the future for free, after all. And then there are fortune cookies, those crispy, sugary treats you crack open after a meal, usually containing a piece of paper with some pre-written generic aphorism or a vague prophecy. If a human being can't look into the future, then surely those ambiguous predictions printed on tiny slips of paper and left inside of fortune cookies could never be accurate, right? Sage was one of those cynics. Sure, some might argue he had every right to be, having fallen on some pretty hard times. Things weren't exactly running smoothly, and his life certainly had not taken the direction that he hoped it would. The trouble had started when, quite unexpectedly, his landlord had raised the rent on his apartment. Sage had been struggling to make ends meet at work already, and the increase in those monthly payments meant his hands were tied. Eventually, he had no choice but to move out, forced by the increase in rent to leave the apartment he had once called home. The one saving grace was that his friends, Ash and Joey, had offered him a place to stay, as long as Sage could throw them a little bit of money to cover their own rent. It was way less than his old landlord was asking for. However, even that came with the unfortunate downside, the caveat that Sage would have to sleep on their couch instead of having his own room. Sure, not the worst thing in the world, but it does beat the floor. But for Sage, it was far from an ideal living situation. To try and lessen the blow of having to leave the independence and privacy of his own place, Joey and Ash had decided amongst themselves to throw a little celebratory dinner. But of course, the key oversight to their plan was that neither of them were all that great at cooking, mostly surviving on either ordering and delivery from local fast food places, or anything that only needed a quick nuking in the microwave in order to make edible. All the same, Ash was adamant that their lack of culinary know-how wasn't going to stand in their way. He and his fellow roommate were going to lay on a slap-up feast for their down-on-his-luck friend, Sage. The only way they knew how: by ordering takeout. "It's food," he remarked, a little lost for words after having seen his two new roommates excitedly yelling "surprise" at him the moment he walked through the door. "Not just any food," Joey replied, grinning like a maniac. "It's welcome to the apartment food." "You wanted to celebrate me sleeping on your couch," Sage said, staring at the mountains of white paper oyster pails on the table with red mandarin lettering and ancient temples painted on the sides. "By ordering Chinese food," he added with confusion. "Look, you've been going through it, man," Ash cut in, explaining things that Sage already knew. "So we figured this might lift your spirits. Check it out, we've got it all here, man. Dumplings, noodles, the works. And for after," he produced a small box, the brand named Choy emblazoned on its surface. Inside were 12 fortune cookies, all individually wrapped for freshness, as the writing on the box boasted. "Hey, maybe you'll get some good news from one of these," Joey smiled, pointing at the box. Thanks, guys," Sage eventually said, chuckling quietly to himself. He had to admit, what his friends were trying to do for him, albeit a little excessive, came from a place of good intentions. Little did any of them know, it was about to change the very course of their lives, their fortunes, forever. Nearly 2 hours and several pounds of greasy Chinese takeout later, the trio of roommates were starting to wonder whether or not this feast had been a good idea. What had started as an innocent meal now had them all feeling a little queasy, having eaten so much food that they were questioning their life choices. And still with a few oyster pails half full of leftover food. Throwing out the empty paper containers and leaving the rest in the fridge, Sage sat back on the sofa, groaning in tandem with his friends and cursing himself for having a third helping of the chili beef. "Oh, damn, I almost forgot," Joey said weakly, reaching for the box of fortune cookies. Opening it, he offered it to Sage, who immediately put up his hands to refuse. "No way, if I eat another thing, I swear I might have a heart attack," he said. We don't actually have to eat them, Ash interjected, picking up one of the plastic-wrapped cookies at random. You only open them for the fortunes anyway. Right, and I guess one of these cookies is gonna tell me that everything happens for a reason, or to keep my head up, or some other vague, non-specific prediction, Sage replied, making no attempt to mask his sarcasm. Come on, man, Joey urged, taking a cookie for himself before thrusting the box into Sage's hands. Sure, they're never perfectly accurate, but it's just a bit of fun. Besides, it's all down to how you interpret your fortune. You aren't meant to take it literally. With a cynical sigh, Sage gave in and grabbed one of the remaining fortune cookies, tearing open the plastic packaging surrounding it in time with Ash and Joey doing the same. He then snapped the yellow, sugary shell in two. A tiny piece of paper was concealed within, with an inscription printed on one side in blue ink. But before he had a chance to read it, Joey, who was sitting next to him and had done just the same, recited his own fortune out loud. "Buy a ticket, trust your instinct, and the numbers will come," he read. "No way that's what it says," Ash argued. "I'm not kidding," Joey protested. "Let me guess, the other side reads, 'This fortune was sponsored by the state lottery,'" Sage joked. Indignantly, Joey held up his fortune to his friends' faces, letting them read for themselves what he had already repeated aloud. Being far from a betting man, Joey had hardly ever made as little as a friendly low-stakes wager, let alone taking the chance on playing either the state lottery or a national one like the Powerball. The odds of winning just seemed like they were stacked too high, and yet something about just how specific this fortune was made Joey feel compelled to maybe give it a try, considering taking a chance and playing against those odds by buying himself a ticket. "My turn," Ash announced, excitedly unfolding her own paper fortune and clearing her throat. "Keep your light on. The person you're looking for will be here soon." Even someone as cynical as Sage had to admit there was something very strange about how detailed these fortunes had been, or seemed to be, at least. Part of him thought maybe that was part of their gimmick, making the text on the paper that little bit less vague and generic than the other ones found in other cookies, so that people would find it easier to believe they were an accurate prediction of the future. But then again, it did seem like a strange coincidence. Sage knew that Ash had been trying to get back into the dating scene, but was having little luck on the more popular apps for meeting new people. Still, it's not like the prediction on that little piece would actually come true, nor would Joey's. But if nothing else, the least it could do was inspire a little hope in the pair of them. Sage looked down at his own fortune, part of him secretly wanting there to be another optimistic message written on the paper. After all, he needed a little boost in that department, even if it was just for tonight. Printed in blue ink were 3 short words. "Look both ways," Sage read, immediately feeling his heart drop in disappointment. "That one sounds way vaguer," Joey commented, highlighting the obvious. "Well, we can't all pick the nice fortunes," Sage retorted, crunching the tiny slip of paper up in his hand and stuffing it into his back pocket. "They're all just randomly generated anyway. There are probably a million fortunes out there that are all worded exactly the same as ours. It's not like any of these will come true anyway." Falling asleep on the couch later that night, Sage had no idea just how wrong he was about to be proven. Almost to the same degree, he had little clue as to what his fortune had actually meant, but would only realize when it was too late. Over the course of the following few months, a lot seemed to be happening in the lives of Sage's 2 friends, and by contrast, very little was changing in his own life. The first surprise came when Ash had met a new flame, a girl by the name of Sky. In Sage's head, it was just a fling, not something he expected to last, although he would think twice about saying it out loud so as to not upset his roommate. But to his surprise, Ash seemed to be utterly smitten with her newfound relationship. The pair of them were happy, the very textbook definition of head over heels for one another. Both Sage and Joey were quick to voice their support, but seeing what Ash's fortune cookie had predicted actually coming to pass got the latter of them thinking. Had that just been a lucky coincidence? Was it just a case of right place, right time? Joey wasn't entirely convinced, despite Sage telling him otherwise. As far as he was concerned, it was all just down to timing and confirmation bias. Something that was impossible to predict or foresee had happened that had just so happened to coincide with what they had read in their fortune cookies. But for his friend, it seemed an awful lot like the fortune Ash had picked was 100% accurate, which meant he could be too. On top of that, Joey couldn't help but wonder, Had the fortunes inside the cookies predicted what was already going to happen? Or did reading those predictions make them become a reality? Eager to find out if his own fortune cookie had been telling the truth, Joey decided to make a spontaneous venture on his way home from work. While riding the subway, he opened up the website for the Powerball and went about purchasing a ticket. The minimum bet was only a few dollars, but if his cookie prophecy was really a guaranteed accurate forecast of the future, then Joey was in for good fortune in every literal sense of the word. His paper slip had told him to put faith in his own instincts, and so with trembling hands he input a series of numbers, going with the first ones that popped into his head. Getting back to the apartment that night, Joey's heart was racing, and he made sure to let the others know about it. Barely able to contain his excitement, the pure, unfiltered nervousness his friend was exhibiting quickly became unbearable to Sage. The draw for the Powerball was fast approaching at the end of the week. Although he was getting sick of Joey claiming his numbers were sure to be called and pondering out loud what he would spend the prize money on, Sage's cynicism still prevented him from believing that his friend was going to win, despite having witnessed Ash's fortune come true already. It wasn't until it happened right in front of his eyes that Sage started to realize just how wrong he might have been. The night of the draw, the three roommates, plus the new love of Ash's life, were gathered around the TV. All of them, apart from Sage, were glued to the screen, barely breathing. The apartment was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop, the silence only broken by Sage occasionally piping up. "Watch, it's not actually going to come true," he would assert, not intending to put a downer on the proceedings, but merely trying to encourage Joey to manage his expectations. The other three shushed him. The numbers were about to be called. Gripping his ticket in one hand, the paper slip containing the fortune in the other, Joey felt his pulse rising, heart bumping against his chest. He wasn't sure if it was out of excitement or nerves. In fact, it was more likely an even blend of both. On the screen, the multicolored balls were pulled one by one out of a spinning chamber, each one marked with a different number. Slowly, the first was revealed to the audience. Joey, Ash, and her partner Sky could hardly contain their excitement when they saw that it was the same as the first number Joey had picked out. It was only when the second number was called and the others once again yelped in excitement so loudly that Sage looked up from his phone and took notice. Before his very own eyes, he watched as each number that the Powerball presenter unveiled was met with a chorus of more and more excited whooping from his friends. They were all a perfect match for Joey's numbers, every single one. He had won a huge sum of money exactly as the fortune cookie had alluded to. Even for someone as skeptical and disbelieving of predicting the future, it was hard for Sage to deny that both of his roommates' fortunes had come true. In fact, it was especially hard to be cynical about it after watching firsthand as Joey won the Powerball by trusting his instincts, which boiled down to him literally picking the first numbers that randomly came into his head. But given how specific both Joey's and Ash's personal prophecies had been, compared to how vague his own was, Sage didn't know if what his slip of paper had said was a promise of good things to come or an ominous warning. It also didn't help that he just couldn't nail down what it meant. Look both ways. For weeks and weeks on end, he mulled the phrase over in his head. It didn't make sense for it to be completely literal, leading Sage to try and think of more metaphorical interpretations of his fortune. He thought maybe there was something political about it, that it might be urging him to consider both of America's two parties more equally when casting a vote, rather than just blindly ticking a box. But the next election was still years away. Meanwhile, the predictions of Ash's and Joey's fortune cookies had already come to pass in the 6 months since they had first opened them. Frustrated and looking for the exact answer behind his paper fortune, Sage was running out of ways to reinterpret those 3 words that apparently dictated his inevitable fate. But the thing that pushed him into pure desperation was the uncontrollable jealousy of witnessing just how happy his friends were after their fortunes became true. He wanted to be happy for them and tried his best to be. But seeing Ash and Sky in their blissful relationship, and Joey frivolously spending his Powerball winnings on expensive clothing soon became unbearable. Having exhausted all other options, still no closer to understanding what his fortune was, Sage decided to visit the Chinese restaurant they had ordered their food from all those months ago. But his heart sank as the staff working in the restaurant told him that whatever was written in the fortune cookies didn't have any bearings in the real world. "You don't understand," Sage argued. "My friends both had their fortunes come true. I mean, the cookies we got from you predicted it almost perfectly down to the word. I just need you to tell me what mine means." I'm sorry, sir," the young man behind the counter replied, "but it must just be a coincidence. Fortune cookies can't accurately tell the future. It's more about what you believe the fortune means. Disheartened, Sage left the restaurant, his head hanging low. As he walked down the street towards the sidewalk, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Taking a look at the screen, still walking, he saw a text from Joey. He was asking if Sage had any luck asking the restaurant about his fortune cookie. Maybe if Sage had done what the fateful slip of paper had told him as he stepped off the sidewalk, then he would have seen the bus speeding down the road towards him. If you want to know the future, perhaps you should only look at your own risk. Sometimes knowing exactly what is destined to happen to you can make it impossible to avoid. A self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. That is the warning given to any who dares to take a prediction from SCP-377. Now residing in the personnel break room at one of the SCP Foundation's sites, SCP-377 is the designation given to an anomalous box of fortune cookies. The fact that the box is seemingly capable of replenishing itself at regular intervals, refilling every 12 hours, happens to be the far less interesting thing about it. Any of the fortune cookies taken from SCP-377 are, well, the cookies themselves are completely ordinary by any and all metrics. They taste exactly as fortune cookies should, and they aren't made of any ingredients apart from those you'd expect. But somehow, without fail, every single fortune found within one of these crispy confectionery clairvoyants manages to be 100% accurate. They aren't generalized predictions for the future. Definitely. None of them have prophesized who the next winners of the World Series are going to be, or who is next in line to be president. Every fortune contained in the SCP-377 cookies are specifically tailored to the person who opens them. These fortunes have ranged from detailed foreknowledge of upcoming events and changes in someone's personal life, to vague, unspecified allusions to what lies ahead. And while always factually accurate and perfectly aligned with the future, the predictions made by these cookies are not always promises of good fortune. One researcher opened up an SCP-377 fortune cookie only to read the phrase, "It's a boy," written on the paper. Less than an hour later, his wife's water broke, and said researcher was soon welcoming his newborn baby son into the world. But another doctor was warned, "You don't have long to live," right before choking on his own cookie. Right there in the break room, that doctor suffocated, killed by the same thing that foretold of his death only moments before. It is for that reason that SCP Foundation personnel are given a warning before helping themselves to a sugary shelled treat. All staff are permitted to open a cookie from SCP-377. After all, they are safe to eat. And Foundation employees are also welcome to read their fortunes. However, they only do so at their own risk. Now go and check out SCP-261, Pan-Dimensional Vending Machine, and SCP-348, A Gift from Dad, if you're still feeling peckish for more appetizing anomalies and snack-worthy SCPs to satiate your hunger.